everyone to the session that we're having today on marketing, how to create and measure revenue. We have four wonderful panelists today that are going to be discussing this with us. The first person that I'm going to introduce is Sarah Sorelli. She's the CMO from Grassi. Welcome, Sarah. The second is Bruce Dittman. He's the CMO from Markham. Welcome, Bruce. Third is Stephanie Koutsaris. She's the senior manager from Baker Tilly. Welcome, Stephanie. And fourth is Nancy Lebig she's the director of brand and marketing strategy from Pro. That's a mouthful. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
So we're very excited. There's a lot that we're going to try to get through and talk about today. And we're going to start off right at the beginning, kind of discussing this huge change we've had this last year with the work from home policy, how it's changed marketing, how it has kind of turned technology up on its head. And Sarah, I know things have changed quite a bit at Grassi, but how has the work from home affected kind of your technology and your budgeting, and what has really gone on there at Grassi over this last year?
Yeah, Jen, thank you. I feel like, first of all, we were just here having these conversations last year. It's amazing how fast a weird year can go. But you know what? Actually, Bruce said something last year in this session where that I think about it all the time, and it has been like haunting me this whole past year in terms of MarTech. Right? He said, technology should make things simpler, not more complicated. Technology should make everything easier, to make things simpler. And later that day, I was like, yeah, it should. It should. And that was like our bumper sticker for the whole past year. We were tasked with, making sure we were getting the most out of our budget and the most out of our people and the most out of our talent and our resources. And we've been throwing around do more with less for however long, but I feel like it's never been more true than it was this past year. We were still willing to invest in the right areas, which we did, but I feel like all of the technology that we explored and implemented and signed on for either automated something or made something easier or helped us prove the business impact of what we were doing to make sure we were spending in the right areas. So I feel like that was the common theme for technology for us. But we got the hang of the productivity tools too. So our marketing department's about 7 or 8 people across a few different offices, and it's so weird that it took a pandemic to bring us closer, but like something about Teams and communicating and the productivity tools strengthened our team, and we got to know each other a little bit differently, and we work better together now. So it was a good year. It was a wild year, but it was a good year for us and for technology, I would say.
Definitely it's been different working from home, I think, for all of us. Learning how to work with our teams better, not seeing everybody face to face in the office, going down the halls, but it's brought technology definitely into the forefront of it. Speaking about technology, how is our technology talking to each other? Because that's one of the issues that we talked about last year, is just making sure that what technology we invest in, that it has to speak to each other, because there's no point of investing in a piece of technology if it can't talk to something else that you've invested in. So kind of let's talk, Nancy, do you want to kind of talk about maybe what MarTech trends you're seeing for the rest of 2021, what you're seeing at Pro, what you're using, what you're hoping for?
Yes, thanks. We have quite an extensive, actually, MarTech stack. We started a couple years ago doing a complete audit of what we had, what was our investment, and what were we getting out of it. And so we've expired many things and then added many more things in. So we are missing a couple components, but we feel pretty good about it. That being said, though, as we all know, just to have the technology alone is just the beginning, right? How do you get it implemented? And frankly, how do you pull it all the way through all your systems to get to that ROI can be really tricky. That chain of evidence, I think, takes a lot of time, and frankly, a lot more time than you might expect, as well as the education and cultural shifts as people need to adapt, and adapt new ways of doing things. COVID forced us all to do that very quickly. So perhaps where we had some resistance and we preferred live events for a lot of different reasons, right? We all miss people, we're social creatures. COVID not allowing that almost forced us to turbo the use of our MarTech stack. And honestly, I think we found it to be up to the task. I think we actually had quite a bit of success, more success maybe than we had expected, because we broke through those cultural norms in ways that I think would have been a lot harder without a pandemic.
That makes sense. I mean, it's forced us to really look at technology in a different way, and maybe move a little bit faster than
definitely
have been comfortable moving before.
Hey, Jennifer, I just had a thought. You asked a good question, and Nancy, you have a great response. I don't know. I would have presumed to guess the ages of anyone on the phone, but I remember when I was on the phone. Listen to me. I was. Some people watching this will remember having a coffee table full of remote controls. Okay, so first there was one remote control, and then we got the VCR, and then we got the DVD, and the cable box, and maybe a TiVo. And the next thing you know, you've got 5 remote controls. Your parents come over, they don't know how to turn the TV on. They sit in the dark all night when they babysit because they just are too intimidated by it. True story. But you got 5 remotes. And then the marketplace says, let's make a universal remote. So then the marketplace makes a universal remote, and if you did it or had smart kids, you could code all of your various remotes into one master remote. You may notice that universal remotes aren't a thing anymore, right? Because they started making TVs that work with everything. So I think, there are 3 phases there that we might apply to our MarTech, right? Where at first, we had CRM, we had time and billing, stood here. We had CRM, stood here. We had research, stood here, BI, or whatever. And now we've got 5 remotes. So then, this is what I noticed going to conferences and things, people started saying, well, here's an overlay. Here's a universal remote where you can plug all those into. It's going to cost you some extra money because it's yet another remote you have to buy and do change management on and do education around. But this will allow you to go one place. And I think we are finally at a place as an industry or as a product that services our industry where they are making smart TVs. Where when you buy something out of the box, it integrates. It's not your problem. The consumer, I don't have to go buy universal remote.
That's an incredible analogy of how it goes together now. Stephanie, why don't you tell us what Baker Tilly's gone through this last year? Because I know they've gone through a lot of change.
Absolutely. So 2 weeks before the shutdown for the pandemic, we had reorganization for marketing, which at the time we were bemoaning the timing because we had new stakeholders, we couldn't meet them in person. But it turned out it allowed us to be very nimble in this new environment. And what the change is that it's actually an agency model. So like my colleagues on the screen, we go to market by industry. And so all these industries we group together, and they had a dedicated marketing strategy team and a dedicated demand generation team. Both teams work together simultaneously, but nonetheless, it allowed marketers to specialize. And what was interesting was, obviously everybody thought the demand gen team, and that includes everything from events to email marketing to webinars, all that good stuff, that was going to be the heaviest team with the biggest workload. But then when you remove events, all of a sudden the strategy, the content, identifying targets, that takes on a whole new level. And so the new agency team really allowed us to accommodate those changes with the technology that we already have. And we actually saw demand from hiring to accommodate that. And talking about trends, we were able to accommodate through a pandemic with no events. When you don't have any events and you have partners who rely on events to network and grow their business, what do? And all of a sudden content becomes king. And it really allows you an opportunity to not only do lead generation, but sound like the expert in the field. So it's been a very interesting change, and everybody is looking forward to events to an extent, but I think that the mix of events versus content is going to be closer to each other than it was now. It's a big disparity.
That's interesting. That is very interesting because a lot of times people forget the fact that, it's wonderful to have events. It's wonderful to be having all of this, live capabilities, even webcasts and, you know, podcasts, but you still have to do the proper type of targeting and you need to know who it is that you're going out after and then tailor that specific message and craft that message specifically to them if you're going to reach them and if your message is going to actually make sense to them. A lot of times it's easier just to do the whole spray and pray type of method and send out one message to everybody, but by being able to take time and craft that particular message to that target and get down to that granular level at that industry, you can be so much more effective that way. That's interesting.
It's worked out very nicely. I think our prospects and clients appreciate it too. And also our events were at such a point where if you looked at our, regional sponsorship, I certainly saw the names of our, friendly competitors here on the screen and everybody was at the same events. And so how do you differentiate yourself in a very crowded market? And so we're using content to do that.
That's like my favorite part of this whole thing. We're not all like sponsoring the same rodeo, like logos. Yeah. I'm like, I'm so done with that. That's like one of the best things to come out of this whole thing.
I know. It is nice to take a step back from going to all those conferences and stuff.
We need to do what all of our competitors are doing. That's exactly why we don't need to do it.
Yeah.
That's something else. There's better stuff out there. Trust me.
Exactly. You need to make your own mark. All right. So I'm just going to throw this question out there to all of you. What would you say in this last year, if you could name one piece of technology that you discovered, what is it and why do you like it? And I'm throwing that out there to any of you.
I mean, I'll share a story. I wouldn't say it's one that we discovered this year, but it's one that we decided to sign on. It was prior to 2020, it was about 3 or 4 years since we had done any type of client survey initiative whatsoever. And it came up last year and we said, you know what, this is probably a really good time to be like very diligently checking in with our clients and asking them, how are they doing? How are we helping them? Are we helping them? What's good? What's bad? And it was one of the best things that we've done in a while, and I wish we'd done it sooner. We did sign on with Clearly Rated. I know many of you may have either used it or have heard of it. And oh my God, how much easier they made that whole process. Wow. But it was something that we saw quite a bit of return on. And it was good. It was good to take the temperature of our service, of course, but when we would normally be face-to-face much more frequently, it gave us an opportunity to have a full picture on any at-risk clients. What can we learn about that? What can we do to turn it around and create even more loyal clients? We added a question in there just asking if our clients needed any additional services, and we gave them the chance to ask for it, and 36 of them did. We had some real qualified opportunities come out of the client survey process. We had the opportunity, I say that in that way, we had the opportunity to have some tough conversations internally where we otherwise might not have had that catalyst to do that. So we were able to be aware of some things that we could probably improve, and we did, and we're working on those things. We got to reward some of our best people for doing an awesome job. We got stats and testimonials to use with content, and it was just another, again, the dashboards, the data, they did all that. Otherwise, we'd be with the papers and the Excel and type it in, and it was just one thing that made life so much easier for us and was a really valuable piece of technology that we implemented, or software or vendor, I would say. Highly recommend, 10 out of 10. That was good for us.
Yeah, I've used them before too, and I absolutely love them.
That was worth the cash.
Anyone else?
I've enjoyed using Site Improve, which it helps with your SEO on different web pages. But that recommendation comes with a warning. It is highly addictive because you want to constantly improve your score, even if your score is great. It's like, I could do a little better, I could do a little better, but in a great way. So it's a fun tool, and it's incredibly helpful. With easy to use, it gives you very actionable ways to help improve the SEO on your page. So.
Okay, I just wrote that down.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that too. I'm gonna paper.
Enable free version.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not to give away a trade secret, I don't think it is at all. We had to really reimagine how we were making virtual events. Spooling up webinars to a degree that had never happened before, and then saying, well, webinars are well and good, but we run a big event program. How are we going to make an experience? Last fall, we brought in On24. We started using On24 as a platform, and it's been excellent. We work with nice people there; they're great, and all of that. But what I'm talking about is the product. It isn't for everything at the moment. They're adapting like everyone else. Sometimes Zoom is a better option if you're talking about really person-to-person conversations or many-to-many conversations. But it's been a great tool for creating a virtual experience, and actually for internally within our department to give people an opportunity to grow. So we created a On24 action team and made a group of experts, and this A team has creative and organizational and people with all kinds of variety of strengths, and we were able to sort of let them loose with the product to an extent that they don't usually have in the course of their business, just based on experience. So there's leadership growth opportunity for folks. They've stepped up, did a great job, and it's a place where we can have some fun as well. So I think that's been, for me. I have a great colleague who is our Chief Marketing Strategy Officer, Allison Fieldman, who is handling our CX and a couple other things. So I'm gonna steer away from there. But for me, the most pleasure for the investment that I've gotten from a marketing technology solution beyond 24%.
That's a great product. We used that, and it's simple, it's web-based, I loved the fact that you were able to do CPE credits through it. It just makes life a lot easier. It actually does what it says it's meant to do.
Isn't that great?
I know. You love it when that happens.
I think from our end, we use On24 as well, and it's quite good. But I think one of the big challenges when you talk about creating and measuring revenue is many of us were reliant on a live event driven, and that's certainly what a lot of our partners were comfortable with. So you moved to On24 is a great product, but it's still maybe culturally challenging. It took people a little bit to get used to, though it is a great product, which makes it easier. I think for us, we leaned into, I would say, two technologies. One is Qualtrics, really using more of their modules as it relates to brand and client and connecting those insights across those dimensions from our more marketing competitive intelligence. And we have found them to be terrific as well. And then the second one is really Tableau. And it's not that Tableau is necessarily the end all be all, could be BI, could be anything, but to the point of how do we create and measure revenue, that challenge of really measuring it, particularly when you're changing the mix so much, everyone wants to know, well, what's working and what's not working. So we worked very hard to drive greater accountability and transparency through that tool, and found that to be quite illuminating, actually, across all of our stakeholders.
So what is Tableau?
So Tableau is an analytics tool similar to a Power BI, things like that. So it really helps, I think, integrate many data streams and make them really work with the data visualization, which I think helps as well to tell a bigger story behind your data. So for us, we've been able to create some dashboards around some key metrics so that all the key stakeholders have access quickly and easily in that format that they can start to predict and understand for every campaign or program what results are looking like. And then we have a better opportunity to see that more transparently and react in real time.
So that would be great for something like our accountants in the audience to understand exactly what marketing is spending on and how it is translating into ROI. Which
Nancy, what do they look at on their dashboards? Is it leads or pipeline related, or what do they look like, and what do they do with that?
Yeah, so for us, we have created a series of metrics depending on where you're at in the funnel. So it isn't necessarily just one metric, and in fact, I don't think we believe you can rely on one metric. This, especially in the B2B space, there's a lot of variables, right? Including what my competitors are doing, right? So you can't just rely on, there's no one silver bullet metric, but we look at a number of different metrics. And I will say it's evolving. It's something we had been building. Like Stephanie, we kind of had this building before COVID, but with such a change to the marketing mix, I think we had to accelerate it and rely on it more. So I don't think we're all the way there yet, but I think we're trying to be thoughtful and sophisticated in terms of a number of key metrics that really drive the business. What do we need so we know what's really driving revenue? And I think we're still experimenting our way into that, but it's different depending on where you're at in the funnel. So that'll be, I think, something we'll definitely take with us post-COVID and continue to lean into.
Similarly, we're doing dashboards in Power BI, and the partners are big fans. It's a win-win because it does allow marketing to measure what's working and what's not. But, Jennifer, to your point, it's kind of speaking the accountant's language, and so they can see it at real time at their convenience. And then everybody's on the same page, too. We don't have to wait for the next marketing meeting to confirm them.
I think one of the things we're trying to do, too, is I think with live events, we could gather a lot of data, but there was also a lot of cracks, right, in terms of how data is collected and what really happened. And then you hear, oh, we have to go to that conference because we always get big business. And then you look and say, well, what big business do we really get, right? Mm-hmm. So a digital world might have helped us stitch that together a little bit. But Stephanie, to your point, we actually think there's certain metrics that the marketers really need to be paying attention to that we don't necessarily need partners to obsess about. But when you talk about what the real impact is through the pipeline of revenue, we do need partners to be more aware of what's driving and contributing to that. So I would actually say the views can be different from the dashboard perspective so that all the different stakeholders have the key bits of data they need to drive really their role in marketing and building brand and business.
So if this leads us quite nicely into measuring, how do we measure ROI for our content and our marketing? And everybody does it a little bit differently depending on your firm and how you look at it and how your executives want to see their ROI and what they're looking for in their measurement. But for a lot of these firms attending the conference, they're starting out or they're trying to set up metrics. So if we can give them some tips on how they should be beginning to set up metrics for ROI, what are the types of things they should be looking for when they're developing content, when they're developing marketing programs, what should they be tying it to? Is it their CRM program? How should they be tying it together? What should they be looking for? So I'm going to start with you, Bruce, because you probably have one of the bigger programs, and then we'll just kind of go around from there and talk about how, what should these people be doing when they're setting up and looking for ROI on their marketing programs and content.
Sure. So, and I think some of my friends on this, I've heard me say this before, but in the old days, people used to say, well, you can't do ROI in marketing, or you can't do ROI on branding, you can't do ROI on X, Y, or Z. To which I would always say is, sure you can, you just don't want to because it doesn't make it's too cumbersome. Here's the X factor. You can do ROI on anything if you agree on what the R is going to be before you make the I. I think where things fall down is when people don't make that clear, and the assumption is always the R is close new business. So first, before we get into any conversation, I want to put that as a disclaimer to anyone who's listening. If you're going to have a return on investment conversation, make sure you agree on what the desired return is that you all can incur, and then make the odd. So that said, without being specific about what that R is, whether it's leads or new business or collections or new contacts or whatever the case may be, doing this isn't super linear. Sure, you have an event, let's say you have a virtual event now, and 150 people come, you run down, 25 people ask questions, you give them all a call afterwards, 2 of them have opportunities and 1 of them closes. Well, there I could tell you a really clear ROI study on that event, for example. Am I going to, and these are all questions that I could put to the group, because I think, as a former salesperson, I think that there's I think it's almost impossible to separate sort of the layers of laminate and accurately assess the ROI to a single item. And I think Nancy said something to this effect earlier, but there are a lot of concurrent factors happening, and you can experiment to see which would by removing each one to see what kind of impact that it has. But that doesn't seem to really be our business. That feels like it should happen in a laboratory environment. Yes. And we're in business. So that said, you can, for example, let's say we have a virtual event in On24, and the scenario that I just laid out happens. Now, I can attribute that return to our events, right? To the efforts of the people who put on the event. I can attribute that to the technology, because without it, we wouldn't have been able to do the event. And as that spools out, I think it becomes less and less meaningful. So I think that you kind of have to start looking at a hybrid and not isolate to a technology. Now, anecdotally, if you have a wonderful implementation of an excellent CRM product, so it goes into CRM, fishes around, discovers an opportunity, and does it, right? And executes on that idea, and closes business, it would seem like you could attribute that to the CRM. However, even still, you can't know that it's not the fact that they got a great CX call. And you can't, that said, went from neutral to yes, right? At what point do we remove, or the general brand of, their satisfaction with the brand, or they like that you've got TV ads, or they recently attended your events. And so it's a long way of me saying, I don't exactly know how to do this. But I do know.
An answer at the end of this, I'm like, so what do we do?
Yeah. Well, I think what we do is, and this is my opinion, and I don't expect everyone to share it, actually. I think we try not to have narrowly defined conversations about. I think we can have ROI conversations. I'm hesitant to actually. I don't like the attribution. I don't like some of the conversations around attribution. Not today. I just mean in general, where I'm going to go, buy a software and do this just so I can attribute dollars to specific marketing efforts, because they can't answer those questions either.
Yeah, I think I came more from the B2C space, working for many of the world's largest agency holding companies, and I think in the B2C space, the media mix, the marketing mix, attribution, and modeling is more sophisticated than in the B2B space. And so I think, Bruce, the danger with attribution is that's probably a place where we don't quite have the tools to give us a fair picture. So we're hesitant because we know it's going to be misleading. And I think so often we can identify sort of the last impulse that they responded to, but we know if we took away all those others, you wouldn't get the same return. I mean, that's been proven over and over again in B2C. Right. It's just that in B2B, we don't have that exact same parallel yet. And so the danger is then we flock to those tactics that actually maybe are more easy to track, but actually are not the ones that created the most engagement with our brand. And so we worry about that because we know ultimately they will actually reduce ROI. On the flip side, I think that is actually a challenge for all of us. As you were saying, the universal remote, the tech stack and the products out there, but the providers, many of us endorse them quite strongly, are getting better. And I think if we can get to better attribution modeling so we really can optimize the mix, we probably will be able to improve ROI, whatever the R is that we're trying to improve. I also think it's never going to be black and white, right? It's the old adage, marketing is art and science. So anytime we try to make it too binary, I think we've taken out the human element, the variability, the creativity. Like there's going to be other dimensions that even the best attribution models don't capture. So to me, I think it's interesting to pursue, but not to be so wholly reliant upon it that we take it as a silver bullet. I don't think that exists actually in any marketing for anybody yet.
Yeah, I had this training unit that I used to give, and I had a slide in that said that there are no silver bullets, only bullets.
Right.
You know, you got to get out there and do it. But yeah, no, I think there's probably there's a holistic way to talk about our marketing technology stack investment in its return, right? But it really has to be holistic, because to anyone listening, I would be really cautious about anyone who said, by signing up for this technology, you're going to increase revenue by X, Y, or Z. Because everyone can't claim the same dollars.
No.
Everyone can't. You know, we have, who's more important? The person, the partner who's spending their very expensive time to write the article, the designers who are designing the vehicle with which to send it out, the email platform or the lead generation platform to send it, the CRM that tracks it. And are we going to count that $50,000 win to each of them? Are we going to divide it across? If so, in what ratio? It frankly becomes a bit of nonsense to me. So ROI is important, but I think you'd say, look, guys, folks, we spent $100,000 in marketing technology this year. Let's make a business case for it. And if we can make a business case for it, then that's okay. If we have a tradition, for Connecticut, I used to be the person who sold all the advertising to a company called Joseph P. Dot. And you'll know them better as the makers of the Chia Pet and the Clapper and the Of Glove and a bunch of, a bunch of famous as seen on TV products like that. They would pay by the lead. They would pay by the call, for B2C. We don't have that. We can't. Right. They can assign value. There's no way back then I was going to buy a Clapper or a Chia Pet anywhere, but right after I saw that ad. And so they can really make a clean attribution. But does my TV ad get the same attribution when I know that I've been sending, a newsletter out to 100,000 people for 5 years? And then we've been having these events. Sorry, I don't have an answer, Sarah. You get one, let me know.
Yeah, I'm still looking. I'll let you know.
I would also add too that ROI looks different for different pieces of content. Content is such a overarching word, and I think that your ROI for a video or a podcast might be different than a 25-page ebook that's dated. We launched a very, very niche podcast, and it's every other week. We just had a 1-year anniversary. It started as a lark during COVID, and it's actually generated leads. And that was never the intent. We were hoping to kind of, create some connection during this very disconnected time, but it turned out to be lead generation. So I think that when you look at your content, you're probably doing a variety of things, like newsletter, papers, all that good stuff listed, but you wouldn't measure them the same way as a ROI.
And I think that's what it comes down to, is you need to, like Bruce said, determine what the R is first, and that needs to be decided. And once it's decided it shouldn't be a moving target. Mm-hmm. If you decide, okay, we're measuring leads on this, well, you shouldn't just determine then 3 months later, oh no, we're going to determine now the sales close. You can't change your mind halfway through and change the ROI scope on the marketers. You have to determine, okay, we're measuring this, and this is what it's going to be. And that's going to be how it's measured for the scope of the year, until, you change it for the goals for the next year. But you need
to. Something to be said too, I feel like, about having that ROI mindset, period. As long as you're thinking that way and wanting to share that, you're just making better decisions, and you're making better choices. I feel like this past year, when we switched to a digital strategy and we were doing, 100 webinars and live videos, and we were getting the opportunities, and in some cases we were getting them faster than we could handle them. So we, at that point, rather than making the decision to invest in another piece of technology, we made the choice to invest in some training for our people to help us convert those leads. Where we were creating these opportunities and giving them to our people, and we were like, what do I do with this now? And it's we decided that we in order to make sure we were getting the ROI from these efforts, we needed to expand our army, so to speak, and give them the actual training and tools that they needed to be able to convert them. And I don't know that we would have made that decision if we really weren't trying to prove that what we were doing was worthwhile. So you start to discover new things to add to your strategy as well.
You do. You do. But you have to go into it with, just like you said, an ROI mindset. Because if you're not thinking about how is this piece, how is this strategy, how is this component, this activity that we're doing going to help the overall marketing strategy? How is it going to, what are we looking to get out of it? Well, then it's just a waste of money. You're just doing something for the sake of doing it, and that's never a good idea. That's just throwing money out the window. So let's look at one of my favorite things is making sure that we have the sales team linked into what the marketing team is doing, and finding that linkage. Sometimes it's through CRM, but that handoff between marketing and sales, where is that handoff that we have? How do you make sure that we know what's a marketing lead and it goes from a marketing lead to a sales lead? So within your own organizations, how do you make sure that you are handing off your marketing leads? Where do you know that point of handoff takes place within your organization? Do you know what that point is? And have you trained your marketers to know what that point is? Do you bring your salespeople in? Like, do you bring them in when you're talking about your marketing campaigns? Do you get feedback from them? That was a lot of questions, but take your pick.
Well, I can tell you that we have weekly national marketing calls, and there are open invitations to our sales folks to participate, many of whom do. The purpose of that is just to have open ears, just to hear what's cooking in marketing. Our salespeople, of which we don't have that many, most of our salespeople are professionals. But of course, everyone is included in all of the communication about the marketing products. And they work very, very closely with the marketer. Generally, a professional business developer at our firm is linked to an industry, minimally an office, an industry or a sector, and they work hand in hand with a marketer. As far as like technological tools and how they stay linked, obviously we're exchanging our information on CRM, but I'm not going to say that is keeping them up to date with what marketing is doing. Okay. That really happens. You got to talk. Yeah.
Like, I know we were setting up in Marketo. It was ours before I left. I'm not sure if it's happened or not, but we were setting up a lead generation program that actually was to do a handoff between sales leads from marketing to a salesperson at a certain point through CRM. But it was quite complicated, and it was a huge investment. And a lot of mapping.
I bet, to be honest with you, we have mapping. challenges, but really, when we receive a lead, it goes from marketing to the appropriate partner, and 90% of the time, maybe 10% of the time, there's a salesperson. The salespeople are doing outside leads. They're running down business, and these over the transom inbound developed leads generally go directly to the appropriate partner, leader, etc. And all of that, of course, is tracked in CRM, but that handoff happens. I want to get a good lead, or frankly, a lead, into the hands of the best person as quickly as possible.
Now, do they feel that it's a qualified lead?
It is not always a qualified lead. So that's, I haven't been a salesperson. That's a cultural thing that I think that there's a sales culture, right? And without qualifying it, better or worse, whatever, doesn't matter, they're different. And some places you have a tolerance for a sales culture accepts that a bunch of these are not going to be good leads, but we're going to hammer them all, we're going to get them all, because we don't have to win them all, we don't have to take them all, but we're going to run them all down, find out quickly if they're good leads, qualify them quickly, and then move forward. Another also legitimate sales culture could be our closers are only going to touch really, really extremely well qualified leads. There are pluses and minuses in both cases.
Yes.
So we do an amount of vetting of the lead. We do, I'm making this up, 5 minutes to Google research onto something, and then and push it along with the understanding that the recipient on the professional side is going to respond quickly, which they do, and they may say not for us. That's okay too. But it is sort of a high information environment with the accepted waste that may create, versus a lower information environment which would have lower waste.
What about you at Baker Tilly stuff?
So we actually created a role that's a liaison between sales, business development, and marketing. And we meet regularly, and what's great about that is it allows us to share any strategies we have or any upcoming campaigns. So for instance, we'll share, campaign ideas that we plan to execute in September or the fall. And this way it's just on the BD's radars, and she goes back and communicates that so they can sort of plan accordingly. So far that's been new, and that's been working well. But I do think that conversation between the BDs and the marketers is so important, because they're out in the market, and so they know what people are looking for, whether it's content or topic ideas or whatever that is, and then marketing is the one who can really generate it. So we always find that the most successful BDs are the ones who really seek out that relationship with marketing. It's no coincidence. And regarding leads, it really depends. I think that if a couple people are leading a webinar, if they're partners, the leads, there's a conversation before always, what are we doing with the leads and people who attend? We will now have that. And a lot of times, if there's another event and those leads haven't been followed up on, it's a change of behavior, we kind of, put a hold on that. And that's been very successful. And then usually BDs will take the bulk of the leads that maybe aren't appropriate.
Okay. Nancy, do you guys do something different?
I would say actually we have quite a span of business, both in terms of the types of customers we're serving, the kind of sales process, the buying behavior, et cetera, is different. So I wouldn't say that it's one approach across the whole business. I would actually say that it's more varied than that, but a lot of the similar themes and trends. And definitely, I think the CRM, Marketo tools, all these tools can help, but that face-to-face, not necessarily live anymore, right? But face-to-face, mano-a-mano, real clear discussion up front in terms of what the expectations are, I think are so absolutely crucial. That's really where the rubber meets the road. And then the rest of it, I don't want to say is easy work, but it's much easier with that tight alignment between sales and marketing and what the expectations are for this particular situation. So I would say we're actually trying to continue to get better at that. I mean, that's one of those, age-old sales, marketing. I think more and more we need both, for sure. And with the technology in our space, as we've been talking about, MarTech is so much more sophisticated. What marketing can do and provide is really different than I think what it was in the past. So continuing that education and that dialogue is absolutely critical.
It is, because I mean, they really are the front line out there with the prospects in the marketplace, you know, they're going out to all the conferences, networking events when they can.
And they will be able to again soon,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, you know, it's funny, you guys just made me think of this, but they are one of the best sources of anecdotal field feedback that we can get.
Yeah.
You know, at any given day, you'll have someone call you up and say, I'm seeing this everywhere. Or here's what happens. I'll see someone who, in the old days, someone who is selling sponsorships to an event will call me up and say, Bruce, I see Markham everywhere. I don't understand why you're not, you know, doing whatever I'm doing. Okay. And on the same day, I'll get a call from a partner who just had a bad business call and say, no one knows who we are. And we're invisible to marketplace, right? So, and there, you know, obviously that's the problem with N of one anecdotal information, but a business developer has no other agenda than making their life easier, I should say. It's not an easy dollar done it, but it's very, very hard work. But our success makes their jobs easier in probably the purest fashion. They didn't have a bad call because they're shy. They didn't have a bad call because they hate sales, or because they don't know what to say, or they don't know the product. That's literally all, you know, their job. So from a purity of feedback, they are probably one of the best sources. And I'm going to make a note to myself, but just sharing the thought, we should ask our BD people more often, you know, how's it going?
Yeah.
You know, that's all just occurred to me. I'm literally writing it.
No, it's a great point. We've played with a couple different models in terms of how that works, but it's a great point. I think that it is anecdotal and N equals 1 or something very small. But if we think about all the other behavioral data we have in our MarTech stack, we should be able to quickly validate some of those antidotes and really decide if it's a scalable opportunity for the business. And, you know, taking that sort of feet on the street feedback and connecting that to data and insights much more quickly to scale an opportunity. I think that's awesome. Wonderful.
Great. So if you guys, we're going to get ready to wrap up here. One thing that you would like to leave our accounting friends with that in their mind for 2021, what would it be? Steph, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. I would say to continue prioritizing and investing in marketing technology. It's not going away, and I think the pandemic has shown just how important it is. And that's not a trend. That is definitely the future of marketing, whether it's ROI, CRM, understanding what targets are. And I know it's daunting and there's a lot, but I think investing in some technology, the right technology, and keeping it up to date is critical.
Great. Nancy, parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would say leave room for experimentation. I mean, the world is changing dramatically, and even when I think about the role of our brands and our partners in their clients' lives is shifting. Business is being tasked to becoming the fourth stool of government in many regards, in really critical ways if you think about ESG and other things. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to take, I think there's just going to be a lot of societal, cultural, environmental, technological, economic upheaval over the next couple of years. So give your marketers room to experiment. Hold them accountable to what those experiments are, but give them room and latitude because it's a very dynamic environment right now.
Good point. Bruce.
I would just say, be wary of simple solutions to complex problems, especially when it comes to technology. And ask yourself, am I collecting remotes? Is this a universal remote? Or is there a product is there a way for me to look at my entire stack holistically and do this better?
Love it. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And I hope that our audience members were able to get something out of it to take back to their own organizations.
Thank you.